We are the only party in this country with the people-centered policies, programs and projects. We are the party which is delivering a better quality of life that is leaving no one and no place behind.
2023 hakuna munhu. This time ndakuda kukupedzera kurova first round.
Mochane nywana babai. Kimi magala mbakuderera mashoko. Nodiwana musiki chonaika zadanika.
This is the free talk. Zimbabwe heads for an election in 2023. The proponents of democracy and those who want to see an end to ZANU-PF regime rule, which has spanned over 42 years in Zimbabwe, want radical movements, want free and fair elections. And they say this will not happen if there is not a radical movement that will force electoral reforms, a radical movement that will see the people of Zimbabwe demand an end to political persecution, the incarceration without trial of prisoners of conscience, the likes of Job Scala, Godfrey Stole, Joanna Mamombe, Netsai Chimbiri, and a lot others. Now here on this, the Free Talk, we are going to be discussing what is the way forward for Zimbabwe ahead of the elections in 2023. Will we have a free and fair election? What will it take for us to get there? What will it take to stop the alleged political persecutions? On this, the Free Talk. Join me just after this break. Welcome back to this, the Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. I, your host as usual, Dara, and we are talking Zimbabwe ahead, forging ahead to the 2023 general elections. A foregone conclusion or not? Now, to help me discuss this matter, I'm joined by the leader of Transform Zimbabwe, Jacob Ngarivume, who has been talking about what many would say a third force. He's talking about a radical change, a radical shift. Something has to move. Thank you very much and welcome on this, the Free Talk.
Thanks, Dara. It's my pleasure to be with you again, and also greetings to all Zimbabweans.
Amazing. Now, I want us to look at your proposition. What is it that you are looking at as we forge ahead to 2023, a watershed election for men?
Yeah. The 2023 election is critical for the nation. You know, we are coming out of years of barrenness and dryness from a regime that has refused to cede power to the people of Zimbabwe. We have tried over the years to make sure that we win an election. And let me say, in 2008, it's on record that the late Morgan Tsvangirai and the MDC won that election, but power was not transferred. And ever since, there has been sticking points as far as elections are concerned. And now we are getting into 2023. We want to look at it to say, what have we done differently which will enable that we win 2023? There's a huge drive for voter registration, which we completely and absolutely understand that we need to register young voters, we need to register as many people as we can, and we want to make sure that we've got a huge voter turnout on election day. But with all that, we want to make sure that we are able to defend that vote. Once we have voted, are we able to defend the vote, number one? And then number two, and more important, what have we done differently to make sure that 2023 is winnable? And that's when we are saying there must be electoral reforms. There must be the basic playing field that should enable a victory for the opposition and put out ZANU-PF. This is where I think the radicalization you are talking about comes in.
Amazing. So, some people, you have touched a storm with your views on social media, on Twitter as you do your post. Some people have regarded you as just talking without action.
We have, for your own information, I was at the forefront together with others in organizing the 31st July movement, the anti-corruption demonstration of 2020.
You were arrested for that?
I was arrested for that, and for your own information, I'm still going to the courts. They still hold my passport. I report to the police once a week. I go to court every 2 weeks. The trial has not even kicked off since 2020, and they still hold my bail money. So I in fact, I also work across the region and internationally, but I've not been able to do any of my work for the past 2+ years because they hold my passport. And we've tried to go to the courts. Because they are compromised, they've even refused to give me my passport for me to do my ordinary day-to-day work as a citizen. So we don't just talk without action. We galvanized the nation at large, across the divide. It was actually for the first time in the recent years that we were able to reach out to people within the opposition and also people within the ruling elites and ruling institutions that normally support the ruling party. We reached out to them and were able to galvanize them along the issue of corruption. And that was so successful. And of course, we were arrested and there was a lot of backlash then. But we don't just talk, but we act. Our propensity is to act, not just talk.
The recent issues that has touched the storm was your statements around the arrest of Job Scala and lack of inaction thereof by his party CCC and leader Nelson Chamisa. Can you talk to me about that?
So what that is seeking to address the need for Zimbabweans to come up and challenge dictatorship. Dictatorships don't just go. If you read history, I'm a student of history and I read widely and I read a lot. If you look right across the patterns, spatial or otherwise, of dictatorship, they never go easily. People need to take a step and a stand to confront dictatorship. Just like the early nationalists also took a stand to confront colonialism, we need to do the same. And what we have been saying about Job Scala is that we have clearly a compromised judiciary system that is detaining people without trial unjustly, and this has been going on, and we need to take a stand. So we have been asking Zimbabweans, irrespective of where they come from, be they CCC, be they Transform Zimbabwe, be they ZANU-PF, be they an impartial judiciary is not good only for the opposition, even also for ordinary Zimbabweans, even also for business people in this country, because one day you will have an issue and you want to go for redress to that judiciary. And once it is compromised, it affects everything and everybody. So we've been saying, let's come out and do things. Of course, I also understand that it has been then interpreted to say, if you are saying that, where is CCC? That's what some of the people have been saying, to say, you seem to be talking more about it than the part that he is coming from. That is subject to the opinion of the people who are saying it. But what we have consistently said is that we need to take a principled stand to speak against what is happening, and irrespective of who it is. And nobody should feel offended by that. That's my view, honestly, because we're urging people to take action.
But you had to justify your statement on social media. You said that it's not that you hate Nelson Chamisa, but you think that at this moment his actions are not sufficient. Can you explain that part?
So what I was saying is that, there was then this debate where people were saying, you hate him, or were suggesting that the criticism is unjust. And my point really is to say, you and I know that I am a great friend of Nelson Chamisa. We've worked together in the MDC Alliance. He was our principal and presidential candidate in 2018, and I've worked with him very closely, and we are such great friends. So the principle is to say, in as much as we are great friends, it's important to accept criticism. Because this is where this nation has gone wrong from 1980, whereby those in power and in authority have refused to accept criticism. They've said once you criticize them, you are their opponent, you are their enemy. It can't work like that. Democracy should not work like that. All I'm saying is to say, in as much, if I love you and I'm your friend, where I think there are issues that need to be raised, it's important that they are raised. And criticism also, if you're a government in waiting, you need to show your attitude towards criticism, to say how will you respond and react to criticism. Because there's no way, even at family, at home, my children sit me down. They criticize me for my decisions. It's very important to then balance all that, to say we can move ahead even with all these criticisms. And also, more importantly, my wife speaks against me half the time, but we still are building a family together. That is important because it enhances and sharpens critical thinking. And this is what I am saying to say, we need to make sure that we take action on ABCD. And I take no regrets about that.
But your words here, you say, I do not hate Nelson Chamisa, but I do believe the moment, I do believe the moment we are in needs a stronger response, or the regime will continue gaining ground.
Yes.
So firstly, you think Nelson Chamisa is weaker?
No, not at all. No, that's not what that statement is saying. That's a complete
you need a stronger response.
A stronger response. What I'm saying is that we have issues that are happening on the ground that needs a response. And to say we need a stronger response is not saying he is weak, but is saying we need a stronger response. It's an edge for him to respond strongly, that we need as a nation to respond strongly. And this is not about him as an individual, but he is the biggest opposition in the country. There's no doubt about that. And we are saying we need a stronger response to what is happening on the ground. Comrades are incarcerated. Life is deteriorating every day in the country. We need a stronger response as a people and as a nation. And of course, led by him as the biggest leader of the opposition in the country. That's the point. That's what we are saying. Suppose one day if my colleagues in the opposition in CCC would call for a freedom march, against the incarceration of those colleagues and comrades, imagine what the response of the regime, the judiciary, and everybody would be. That would be big. So these are some of the ideas that I'm throwing. So this is with an intention to urge our colleagues and everyone to step up the pressure against the regime. So that's all.
You tried to step up the pressure against the regime in July 31, and the response was that the whole CBD was sealed out. And there was no pressure whatsoever on the regime, was there?
There was pressure. The fact that they mobilized, the horses came out for the first time, I don't know how many. The fact that even when they arrested us, that became talk of town everywhere, internationally, the international pressure that came through, the Black Lives Matter ideas that came from our incarceration and everything that was happening. The coming in of the international community, the coming in of SADC, remember?
Do you do things for the international community or for the Zimbabwe?
No, I'm saying all that came as a result of the pressure we applied on the regime. There is the reaction and response was bad, as expected. This is how dictatorships respond half the time. But the thing then is, look at what happened. how then local people responded, how Zimbabweans took to social media and raised awareness of what was happening. And then SADC, for your own information, sent an envoy to try to discuss the issues out, to say something is not right. There was a lot of pressure on the regime, actually. There was a lot of pressure. You see, sitting down and doing nothing is never comparable to citizens that come up and make a step forward. You see, because you need to outsmart dictatorship.
What is the cost to the citizen?
There is a cost in fighting dictatorship half the time. I've just told you of how I've lost all my freedoms. I've lost my passport and I've not been able to do any of my work. I've not been able to visit any of my companies for the last 2.5 years outside the country. You see, things have been haywire. At a personal level, I've lost a lot. I received death threats. You see, as I was just walking in, I opened my phone and then I had actually to sit back on my seat because, I opened the phone, a calibre message came through. We're still following you. We'll get you. We'll deal with you. Somebody says that message. I look at those messages every day. So the cost of fighting dictatorship, my brother, is never easy. And we as leaders, we're prepared for that. Others have lost their lives. Our colleagues, More Blessing Ali died. The Tondela Indiras and many other people who have been together within the struggle have lost it. And so we fully understand that the cost of fighting dictatorship is high. But as leadership, we need to weigh the costs, and we are committed to take up that cost. Because if we are not, then it doesn't work.
How do you balance between being peaceful and raising that cost and preserving lives? How do you balance?
There's a very good balance. That's a good question, actually. Because half the time, people would say, if it costs life, then it should never be done. The idea, remember, even for the July 31st movement, it was all about peaceful demonstrations, which are provided for in the Constitution. We have never called for anything illegal. Through from section 58 through to 62 and so on of the Constitution of Zimbabwe provides for peaceful demonstrations. And this is exactly what we've done because it's provided for in the Constitution. So to us as leaders and to me personally, I am very clear that any of the things that we're calling for, the peaceful marches, the peaceful protests, be they whatever, is all peaceful. And what then happens is those who provoke violence are the ones who are responsible and culpable and guilty. And they should not be doing that in the first place. And in any case, even if there is no demonstration, they abducted More Blessing Ali. Even if there is no demonstration, they've incarcerated people. Even if there are no demonstrations, they've abducted the famous three that you talked about from Triple C. Those innocent, beautiful ladies, they were abducted, tortured, and taken to court. There was no demonstration, whatever. So you need then to understand that you putting up and stepping as pressure against the dictatorship is never easy because what the dictatorship is looking for is violence, and they're looking for an opportunity to make sure that they harm the people. But we must just be strong and make sure that we're able to go forward. Otherwise, the contrary of that is worse.
Morgan Tsvangirai once said, "I will not walk on dead bodies into my way to State House." Mm-hmm. Do you not think that this pressure that you're talking about, this movement that you're talking about, would probably result in walking on dead bodies on the way to power?
And neither am I saying anybody should walk on dead bodies to State House. I've never said that. But now, if we say putting up pressure against a regime to enable free and fair elections, and for instance...
But you agree that there's a cost, and that cost will be human lives.
I mean, look here. The intention is not to have the cost as human lives. Because remember, already I've said to you, I receive death threats every day. I'm still going to the courts. I'm threatened with arrest every other time, So it's already the cost. And we have not done anything, So the point really is to say, we are not calling for people to be killed by applying pressure on the regime, because there should be no reason for anybody to be killed by demanding an even electoral playing field. By demanding that elections should be run according to the SADC guidelines and principles to free and fair election, there are certain articles that call for instance, free and open access to state media by all contesting parties. And for us to call for that should not provoke anybody into killing people. And this is what we are saying. We are saying, let's make sure that should we go into that election, all these things are done. And let's apply the pressure to make sure that it is done. We take no regrets about that. Absolutely. I for one, even if they succeed in killing me, maybe from here they shoot me dead as I walk out of this place. But I want it to be on record that I take no regrets in urging Zimbabweans to be firm in demanding for their rights, because it's their sovereign rights. Zimbabwe is our heritage. We have no other country to do that. And if it means we call for free and fair elections and somebody feels that we should be killed for that, that is wrong. That's not what we're calling for. The burden is on the regime and the dictatorship to prove, to say, why do they say if Zimbabweans apply pressure for a free and fair elections, they should be killed? That is evil. That is dictatorship. And it's squarely on their hands, not on citizens who are calling for it, because it's provided for in the Constitution of Zimbabwe.
Look, August 1, 6 people died, 22 seriously injured. Those who lost breadwinners, who lost their parents, are struggling right now. Those who are injured are struggling to live on. No one helps them after that. And yet leaders are the ones who are at the forefront of calling for protests. Where do you go after people are killed, after people are injured?
Now, you have brought in a very interesting dynamic. You're talking of August 1. And what seems very unfair is the notion which the regime projects to say, if you demand for fairness and freeness, we'll come and kill you. And then at the end, they will then blame that on the peaceful leaders who have called for freeness, for freeness and fairness. That is not right. That is not correct. If you look at what happened on August 1, there was a commission which clearly showed that the action and behavior of the army was way, way beyond what they should have done. The level of force they used was completely uncalled for. Those citizens were unarmed. The demonstrators were not armed. They were not a threat to anybody. But then they went on to shoot and kill people. And the videos are there on social media. And you look at that guy who later on they were saying 45 degrees and whatever. You look at the viciousness and the coldness of his heart as he's shooting on innocent civilians. You see that it's completely unprovoked. There was an order to shoot innocent protesters. And that can't be blamed on the people who have died. You can't do that. It's not common sense. You can't blame it. Neither can you blame it on Nelson Chamisa or the leaders of the MDC or Triple C or anybody in the opposition, because the violence was initiated by people who asked them and gave orders to shoot innocent civilians. So these things should not be confused. You see, if, for instance, put into perspective the Sharperville massacre, the Black Consciousness movement, Steve Biko, they called for that Soweto uprising in 1976, and then the apartheid regime comes and shoots people and kills them. You don't blame the people who have been killed, because clearly they are doing that unprovoked. So this is exactly the situation you have about August 1. And now what they want to project, what is very unfortunate actually, is that they want to say, because we shot and killed you in 2000 on August 1, you try anything to put pressure on us, we'll kill you again. And then they silence the people. And is that what we want? And it's not only that. Remember the violence that happened across the country, the June 27 violence of 2008, when they lost that first round and then the runoff was bloody. They killed people all over. And you know what now they are doing? They simply shake the matchbox and say, if you vote against us, we'll come and burn your house again. We've done that before. And then the people are cowed in. They give in to say, if we vote against ZANU-PF, just this whole last week I was in Gokwe. I was in the heart of Gokwe, meeting civilians. And then I met people who were saying, here we rather support and vote for ZANU-PF. Why? Because of the violence that will come if we don't vote for them. And we don't want the violence. So is then that the doctrine we need to project in the country, that if you vote against ZANU-PF, you'll be killed. If you vote against ZANU-PF, there'll be violence on your doorstep. We can't do that as the opposition. I, as Jacob Ngarivume, cannot accept that doctrine. I will stand up and say, no, ZANU-PF must be challenged. I take no regrets about it.
Amazing. The threat of the blow is actually more effective than the blow itself.
Exactly. Sometimes it happens. The threat of the blow, that will blow you out. But people like me, unfortunately, can't give in to that.
You talk about reforms ahead of the election. Do you think that they'll ever come?
That's interesting. To say, do you think reforms will ever come? You know, the reasons why I talk about reforms is that I understand that without those reforms, it's impossible to win an election. You know, it's impossible. And we need them to come. That's why I think now people feel I am a radical. Because I say they have to come. The reforms have to come.
Do you think they are going to come?
Yes, if we push enough. If we push enough, if we push hard enough, they will come. But if we develop an attitude that, they will never come anyway, so guys, let's just go to those elections. And you know what? If we go into those elections without the reforms, it's the same outcome all the time. The ZANU-PF wins, we win
in 2008, there was no reforms, and Morgan Tsvangirai won that election, didn't he?
You see, but now you need to understand that the 2007 negotiations in Kariba had started. And basic reforms that Thabo Mbeki had already pushed for were implemented. And ZANU-PF were actually not expecting Morgan Tsvangirai and the MDC to win that election. They actually thought it would be game as usual. They'd done enough damage. There was never violence. You know, the MDC were quite able to penetrate in rural areas, which now have since been locked out. You know, so there were basic reforms which had been negotiated in Kariba in 2007, actually, for your own information. That's what the opposition rode on to be able to win March of 2008, which was very quickly reversed when we went to the runoff. So reforms, make no mistake about it, reforms are basic. I mean, you get into a country, I mean, let me just stress this point before I give you that platform. So you get into a country where, I mean, I go around, you know, so as I was driving from here, Goko, and all over the place. Interestingly, for your own information, I've never seen a picture of the main opposition leader anywhere, you know, a billboard, you know, of CCC or anything. It's all ZANU-PF and ED. And it's never about money. Why? Because they block it half the time. I mean, those are basic things. I mean, you watch television every day. You watch television every day.
I watch HSTV.
Thank you so much. And I watch it as well. You know, you watch it, you watch ZTV. It's all about Mnangagwa, Auxilia Mnangagwa, and Constantino Chiwenga. Those are the three main characters that play out on that television station. But this is public media. This is public media. It's so disgusting. And if you get into that election without those basic reforms that you would find in any other country, and then I say to myself, what are we trying to achieve? Can we achieve it if we can't push for Nelson Chamisa's face to be in First Street or anywhere? I mean, that's unacceptable. You can.
But you talk about these reforms. And just recently, you know, commissioners at the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission were announced. And then you have a daughter of a former vice president and a second secretary in ZANU-PF sitting in the commission to decide elections that are going to play out between her father's political party and other people. Does that tell you of any appetite of reforms that can probably come?
Actually, Dara, interestingly, when I go through that and I see it happening, and remember that lady went through the processes in parliament, you know, it gives me the more vibe and strength to fight. It gives me the propensity to say we need to do something even radical to make sure that we confront this dictatorship. Because, I mean, the dictatorship has got no shame, for your own information. I mean, to them to appoint Kembo Mohadi's daughter, you know, it shows a level of no shame that to confront them, you need also a certain level of determination to overcome them. So they remember when Jonathan Moy was in power, he gave us very nice summaries. He would say we will never reform ourselves out of power. You know, ZANU-PF will never take any reform that takes them out of power. So that is their attitude. So we must have an equal and more determined attitude, an equal and opposing attitude to say we want to make sure that, you see, if we had gotten in the streets actually because of that Mohadi's daughter issue, if we have gotten into the streets and demanded for her to be removed, you know, she would have been removed. But if we keep giving in, they keep gaining ground over us. And to me, that is unacceptable. That is not acceptable.
You also say here that politics says it's okay for Mnangagwa to ignore the recommendations of the Motlanthe Commission. Rational thinking says that ED has no such authority. We want credible elections in 2023, and the people define the conditions that could make it possible. Now, let us talk about this.
Yeah. You know, the Motlanthe Commission, you talked about August 1. What has ever been done? The recommendations, what has ever been done since the recommendations came out? Nothing. And also, ZANU-PF has got a history of setting up commissions, which they never then follow through or, you know, they never implement the outcome of such commissions. And it's not the first time. It's expected anyway. So by saying the politics, I mean, this is what they have done, at least by history. They've done that consistently, you know. But then we know that that's not the right thing morally. That is not the right thing. Citizens deserve better. What has been done? Has the army come out in the open and committed itself to uphold the constitution of Zimbabwe, to say they will never get into the streets and shoot at innocent civilians again? They've never done that. And the army is also on record of saying, even if the opposition wins, we'll never give in power to them because power belongs to the ruling party because we went to war together. Has that been reversed? No. So all those are basic things that the moral law of this country calls for them to say, this is not right. And by saying the people of Zimbabwe needs to define the environment under which the next election needs to be fought, we are saying the people need to define and say, has the position of the army been dealt with? Do we now have a Zimbabwe military that upholds and swears allegiance to the constitution of Zimbabwe and not to the party ZANU-PF? That is very important in any country. I mean, in all functional democracies, you never have an army that meddles in the affairs of the politics of that country. This is how democracy is preserved. The independence of institutions, whereby the judiciary is independent of the executive and the executive is independent of the legislature, and also the legislature administrates some of the functions of the country. That's a proper democracy. But do you have that in this country? No. You absolutely don't have that. And so this is what we're saying. The people need to define now to say, what environment do we need as we go to 2023?
Some opposition leaders have said that 2023 can only be solved by the politics of rational disputation, dialogue. What is your thinking on that proposition?
No, I mean, we need to find each other as a nation. I mean, there's no nation that ever progresses if it doesn't find each other. Do you know we are one of the only few nations of the world who never agree on anything? We are not even agreed on who our heroes are. I mean, I tell you, there are people who lie at the National Heroes Acre that I've got no idea what they ever did to the contribution of this country. So we need to find each other. I have no dispute and no problem about that. That we need to find each other. We need to find each other with our opponents and so on. But the issue really is to say, do we need an election in 2023? Yes, we need an election because the Constitution defines that we have elections every 5 years and that we need those. But for that election to happen, we need to agree on basic tenets to say how, under what environment do we want that election to be run? And this is when then the dialogue can come in. To say people need to speak to one another and agree on defining the election that we want in 2023. But that dialogue, I honestly hope and wish that it's never about people wanting to share power, to say like the GNU arrangement or something like that. I don't believe that. But I believe in people finding each other to define the conditions we need for 2023 and beyond.
And are conditions ripe for that dialogue in Zimbabwe? Do you see it happening?
You see, for people to dialogue, it only takes political will. And the question is to say, do we have the political will in all the players that are involved? And sometimes you look at the arrogance displayed by the ruling regime, you actually realize that we are still far away from that willingness. And I wish we were closer, but sometimes I see as if we're far from finding each other as a people.
In your view, who should take the quantum leap to make this talks possible, this dialogue that will find Zimbabweans finding each other? The opposition or those with the ruling mandate?
It's everybody. I mean, look recently, let me put into perspective. The churches tried to revive an initiative called the Zimbabwe We Want. And part of that, I followed through the paces. I walked through the paces very closely with them. And one of the things they wanted to achieve from that, in fact, was they wanted to promote national dialogue, bring everybody on board, including the ruling regime, the opposition, civil society, student movements, labor, and everybody. And what happened to that initiative? Bishop Magaya was arrested, pastors were beaten up, and the police blocked any possible meetings to launch such an initiative to the nation. And yet these are initiatives that in normal countries would bring people together. So it then shows you the unwillingness of the ruling regime to have people of Zimbabwe finding each other and dialogue one another. And that is the problem precisely. So the initiative could either come from the ruling party, the opposition, the churches, or any Zimbabwean can do that initiative. But there are forces in the country who are prepared to make sure that it doesn't happen. And that is the problem.
And why wouldn't any Zimbabwean want peace and peace generally brings development and prosperity, doesn't it?
Yes, they never want it because they prosper under dark environment. They love darkness because their deeds are evil. The corruption you see in this country is possible because there's no peace, there's no transparency, and there's no accountability. And they want, for as long as Zimbabwe is in its current state, they will continue to promote corruption. They will continue to inflate figures and buy cheap medicines for millions of dollars and line up their pockets. They will continue to steal from diamonds, diamond revenue. They will continue to be. So they don't want order and sanity and reason because they thrive on corruption, they thrive on darkness, and they thrive on evil.
You lead your own political party. What is the state of your political party?
Transform Zimbabwe is, you remember, we're part of the MDC Alliance. And when we went into the 2018 election, after the 2018 elections, we resolved that we want to go back and strengthen the then young political party. And this is precisely what we have been doing. And one of the initiatives we took as Transform Zimbabwe was the birthing of the July 31st movement, where we said, let's identify issues that bring Zimbabweans together. And we ran with the July 31st movement as a political party. And then not only that, so we've now identified to say, as we get into 2023, what is it that we need to focus on? And for the past 4 or 5 years, since we left the MDC Alliance, we've identified issues that we've been promoting and pushing for. Number one, we've identified the issue of electoral reforms. That's why we're so passionate. And then also the anti-corruption drive. We've been very passionate about the anti-corruption drive. And thirdly, we've also been saying we need to focus on working together with others getting into 2023, because we obviously don't dread the idea of splitting the vote. We say, who can we work with as long as we have identified common values in that matrix?
Do you have anyone you have identified so far?
We are great friends with many of our colleagues, Triple C, ZAPU. I can mention quite a number of parties that we are talking to and trying to see if we can find each other. So yes, we have. Former members of the MDC Alliance, most of them are still good, or even, some have since gone away. I mean, but I mean, I've talked.
What do you mean? Some have since gone away in the.
I mean, I don't even know whether they still exist. That's what I'm saying. I don't know whether they still exist. That's the point.
The MDCT was part of the.
I mean, I'm not talking of the MDCT. I'm not.
Are you talking to them?
I said other members of the MDC.
Okay,
yeah.
But I'm just asking.
No,
you.
we are not. We are not.
Why not?
We are not because there's not been a common platform that has put us together. We have our reservations about their kind of politics. So we have not. Yeah, we have, and we have a right to differ with them from their kind of politics. So, I mean, it's the third thing that we have identified that we need to deal with as Transform Zimbabwe. But we are also focusing on growing and strengthening our structures and what we stand for and our fight. It has been very difficult. The circumstances to grow a political party in this country have been very difficult.
How so?
It's so because of the persecution that comes, that comes from the regime. People have been persecuted. People have been beaten up. I tell you of the death threats that we go through. It's not only me, even some members of some leaders from our political party have been receiving the same. I mean, my family has been threatened. I don't even want to talk about it, but my family has been threatened. My children, my wife, everybody. So you see, and you look at that, the cost is quite high. And infiltration, the regime is good at infiltrating and causing disharmony in organizations. And all these are things that we've been battling with going forward. But we have put up a good fight. We have managed over the years, the last 5 years, we've managed at least to stay in that fight. Yes, we have been hit hard, but we've stayed in that fight. And then we hope we are able to continue to grow a strong political organization going forward.
Do you think you'll be strong enough to challenge for presidency in 2023?
I mean, that comes from how we are building it as we are moving. I mean, I've told you of how we are also engaging with others. And yes, the reason why we are building is our belief and faith that we can get there. So if we feel we have what it takes, yes, we can. We can. But that decision has to be made when you cross that bridge.
We're only 10 months away or less.
Yes.
You should have at least a pointer to what you want to be able to do.
And currently, I mean, I've said I have been engaging because we prepare for 2023. And if there are other decisions that can come, then they can always be made known to the nation. But I think, you play your cards also very close to your chest, given the environment. We have got a whole strategy that we are implementing. But of course, you can't then openly open your cards and show your enemy at this stage. But those cards will be revealed in the appropriate time soon.
Some people on social media have actually said that, Jacob Ngaruvume, you have your own political party. Mm-hmm. Why don't you implement all these things that you're talking about, the pressure, the demonstrations, using your own political vehicle instead of urging others on? I
mean, I'm urging Zimbabweans. There's no problem. It's part of the implementation. If I urge citizens and ordinary citizens, organizations, church organizations, political parties, that should be fine. That's my right, absolutely, as a citizen and as a leader of a political party. So the idea really is not to compete with anybody or anything. The idea really is to urge citizens to act. Just like, the incarceration of Job Sikala. Let's talk about it. He is not a member of my political organization, honestly. We have been arrested together for the July 31st demonstrations. I spent days at Chikurubi together with him. I know what it means. So we are calling for his release, not because he comes from our political party, but he's a citizen. So with the same spirit, we reach out to all citizens when we are making these campaigns. And I see nothing wrong with that. Absolutely.
Here, just about 2 days ago, you say Zimbabwe needs a strong opposition with a different playbook. Week after week, we project weakness, not strength. Now you're directly criticizing the opposition parties that already exist.
I'm saying we, meaning I am also included, So I think you need to read in between the lines to say, I'm saying we. And my call there...
No, but your statement says Zimbabwe needs a strong opposition with a different playbook.
Exactly. Us in the opposition.
So the CCC is not the opposition that is needed. The MDCT is not. Transform Zimbabwe is not, because these are already in existence. You need a strong opposition with a different playbook.
No, what Dara that is saying is speaking into the opposition to strengthen itself and be prepared. I think it's also including myself. I feel half the time I'm sitting down and I'm saying, what have we done enough to address the issue of Job Sikala, Godfrey Stolle, and the rest of the incarcerated comrades?
So you are saying you're weak?
I'm saying we need to do more. You see, that statement should actually encourage us to do more. I'm saying we need to do more. I also feel that I need to do more. We need to do more to address the injustices that we have in this country. That is my point. And that's how citizens should read my statements. I'm saying we need to do more, honestly.
But you're a political leader, Jacob, and you can't be saying the opposition as if it's me who's sitting out, who doesn't have a political party, and I can't be you can't be speaking like an ordinary person. That's what you're doing here.
You see, that reflection is actually, to me, that's leadership. Because if you are faced with a situation and you feel that you have not done enough, then you want to be honest with yourself. You want to urge yourself to go forward. You want to propel yourself. You want to find a new spirit in yourself to do more. And this is what I'm saying to say, as the opposition, we need honesty. And I stand by that. We need to do more. We need to do more to fight for electoral reforms. We need to do more to register new voters. We need to do more to confront dictatorship. I stand by that.
Your last statement says that you project week in. Let me just read it. Week after week, we project weakness, not strength. What is the weakness?
I was there talking about our colleagues going in and out of court and nothing is done. They are continued to the continued incarceration of those colleagues, and then also the deterioration of the economic situation and the state of life for ordinary citizens. And to say we have not addressed all those issues effectively, and the continued corruption in the country. Millions of dollars continue to be looted. Hospitals continue to be just empty. But
you're not talking to your statement, because your statement says week in, week out, we continue to see weakness in the opposition and not strength. What is the weakness of the opposition that you're talking about? Because this is a national weakness.
The confrontation of the situation is what I'm saying. You see, as these things continue to get bad, and then we are in our lack of action to address it or to push for change and reforms. This is what I'm saying. No, as we displaying weakness by failing to effectively address that. And to effectively address that means to us, we call for action against that. I've proposed that we come together, we agreed to say, this is what we're calling for. Coordinated action. We can't work in silos when a country is in a crisis like this. Coordinated action. What have we done? This is what I'm saying. Our failure to coordinate that, our failure to speak out and project our preparedness to fight. This is what I'm saying. We are projecting weakness. We need to do more.
Do you think there is an opposition political organ or party in this country that can match ZANU-PF at the moment?
Yes, there is. There is. The reason why we are an opposition is because we believe we can match them and outsmart them. I mean, make no mistake, we can't be in opposition if we are not prepared to to match them and outsmart them. I believe we need to. You see, I mean, you have just been talking of Triple C, the biggest opposition party in this country. So you don't believe that they're actually strong enough to effectively challenge ZANU-PF? I mean, I believe that. I believe that if we are coordinated enough as the opposition, we can outsmart them.
What will it take for you as opposition to be coordinated enough?
It takes willingness, political willingness, the will to do it. The will to do it. And also the realization that we need to do it. You see, our attitude also needs to change. If you come to me and say, Jacob, look here, your organization has not done enough in the past 5 years. If you come to me, or even if you were to write it or whatever, then I can't take you to say, oh, you hate me, then you are my opponent, you have been sent by ZANU-PF. That is the wrong attitude. I need to listen to you and say, how can I improve myself? That attitude actually is what can make us coordinate the opposition in this country. Our ability to accept that, certain things we have not done certain things right. We need to improve on it. And then how do we improve on it? That becomes the next question. You see, so when we are that flexible and prepared to look into the mirror, because sometimes, there is a time when things are happening, maybe you have been so sick, and then you can't afford to look in the mirror. You say, oh, if I look in the mirror, I see that I'm finished, so I won't. But you have to look into that mirror. You have to gather your strength, look into that mirror and say, how can I improve this face? How can I improve myself? If you're a lady, you buy your black or pale set, whatever, and then you improve yourself, and then you're able to fight. You see? So this is what I think, this is the process that I honestly think we need in the opposition. But serious introspection.
What makes you think that your views are right?
So I project them, and it's up to the people of Zimbabwe to judge whether they are right or not.
So those who have resisted those views, you look at them as people who are refusing to look into the mirror?
I don't. Mm-hmm. I say if they've refused my views, it's their democratic right. They've got an alternative view that they feel is right. And there's a platform. There are platforms they can always prove us wrong. Maybe we can get into 2023 without reforms. No, nothing. People are afraid to challenge ZANU-PF, as we were earlier on saying that, no, they'll kill you. And then in the rural areas, and then we with very little minimum campaigns, and then we can still have a victory for the opposition. That's beautiful. And if that happens, it should then never be taken to say, because these views, my views, if they've challenged 1 or 2 Zimbabweans, they are good enough. That's what I want. So that is victory.
So if Alex Magaisa, may his soul rest in peace, he used to speak about what he called unintended consequences. Mm-hmm. Now, in this instance, the unintended consequences of your message that without reforms the elections will not be won would probably result in a couple more Zimbabweans not registering to vote, because they are thinking, well, your intention is not that, but there could be an unintended consequence of that nature.
But remember, Blessed, we have pushed very well for people to register to vote. I mean, it's one of the things we have been pushing for. So this message is tweaked.
But the numbers are still very, very low.
The numbers are very low. Yes. The numbers are very low.
Because sometimes of those messages that make people believe that
not at all.
Voting in 2023 will not change anything, because without these reforms, no one will win.
No. You see, the point really is, part of the reforms we also are calling for would enable more people to be registered to vote. See, that's the problem, Blessing. It's a catch-22 situation. Part of the reforms we are demanding for will ensure that more people register to vote. And if we are not prepared for that, if absolutely we are not prepared for those reforms, then it makes it very difficult. Remember, just now, we don't have all these mobile units for people to access IDs, because remember, IDs is a big sticking point. I have been to the national registration, the national registry. I confronted them about it, and then they told me that they are still waiting for the central registry to issue out orders and to give them that go ahead to start doing it. But meanwhile, we are 10 months away from the election, as you are saying. So this is what we are saying. We need reforms that should enable Zimbabweans to have access to their IDs, and not for them to travel having to fork out money to go and get your ID. It has to be convenient, because those are basic rights for any citizen. And these are the same reforms that we are calling for and saying, without them, even to register the people to vote, you won't have enough and sufficient. You see, because when we are tweeting and writing here in Harare, half the time I'm here because I'm doing a lot of stuff here. So as I'm tweeting, I actually forget that, when I went to Mberengwa, for some of those people to get to the center where they register to vote, it's so far. And that's where the only center is, at Bataga. So how do you expect an ordinary citizen to get transport to go to Mataga to register, to get an ID, for instance? So these are the basic things that we're saying. Even if we say, okay, let the gospel only be register to vote, and then we'll vote in numbers. But as long as these hurdles and stumbling blocks are there, we need reforms to make sure that the stumbling blocks are removed and people are able to register in their numbers. The numbers are very low and worrying. So the point really is to say, if we don't say it and don't push like this, unfortunately, we'll all run with, the numbers were actually shocking. You remember when they were released by ZEC at the end, I don't know when was that. That at the time when they released the numbers, it was under 2,000 or so that it drags after such a huge national voter registration drive. And then we identified the issues to say, these are the issues that need to be looked into. So our arguments have always been very logical and with effect.
Do you think logic wins over popularity? I mean, I just saw Tendai BT, has written a book that has come out, The Rise of Populism in the World and in Africa, and where populism has actually been winning ahead of logic.
But populism needs to go hand in hand with logic. Because, even if you are popular but you have got no logic, you are unlikely to win. So you would see that there's a twinning aspect.
So ZANU-PF does have logic?
They don't have, absolutely.
But they're winning?
But they're not popular. Neither are they popular. ZANU-PF wins because, and the win is wrong. They win in courts because they use instruments of force and evil. They beat you up if you don't vote for them. They starve you if you don't support them. If you are not their member, you don't have access to food that should be coming from government. So they use all these dirty, fascist and evil tactics that you would have your Hitlers and your Mussolini's use way back then. So they are not popular, and they don't have logic, but they have instruments of cruelty on their side, and they use them very openly and happily.
One academic I spoke to said, ZANU-PF moves in unison as a well-oiled machine that does not have internal squabbles showing out in public. Whereas the opposition, you are always haggling amongst yourselves, fighting to outdo each other, and sometimes in your spirit of correcting each other in public, you give advantage to ZANU-PF. What do you think about that prognosis?
Firstly, I don't agree that ZANU-PF is a well-oiled whatever. That description, your earlier on description of ZANU-PF, I don't agree with it. There are lots of factions within ZANU-PF, and they are playing out in the public. Things are happening in the public, and the coup of 2017 was an epitomized the internal squabbles within that organization, and it was playing out in the public. The Grace Mugabe rallies, everything was playing out in the public. Those toxic divisions within that party have always played out in the public, and it's on record. But I actually don't, when you're talking of the opposition, we're talking of opposition political parties, which are not one unified party and organization. So, and I've never seen squabbles in the opposition in as much as we see them in the ruling party. You never see that. There have been splits, just like in ZANU-PF, there have been splits, and then there have also been splits within opposition organizations. But as organizations grow, those are laws of organizational growth. People split and differ. So it's still acceptable. And all those, you still find them even in tenets of democracy, where people disagree and they decide to part ways and go different ways. But then to describe ZANU-PF as a well-oiled machinery which does not have factions and what have you, is completely untrue to me. In my view, I respectively differ from that opinion. There is a lot of divisions within ZANU-PF. But what I think they have as an advantage, they have all the instruments and levers of power which they hold exclusively onto themselves. For instance, access to public media that I earlier on alluded to. They make sure that it's public media, whereas I know I love your HSTV and whatever, but the reach is also limited, and access to data and so on. But the public free frequency that publishes ZBC and what have you, it's for all Zimbabweans to access. But then they hold it onto themselves. TV is all about what Mnangagwa has done, ZANU-PF this, ZANU-PF that. If any opposition comes out there, it's all negative. And it's hardly so. So you see, that control is what is given them, is what puts it where it is. It's never about good organization. It's never about anything. But it's about controlling instruments of power and a dictatorship that refuses to loosen up. If it is under no pressure, they refuse to do the right thing. That's what they've done.
I want to thank you very much, President, for Transform Zimbabwe, for joining me on this, the Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. As I normally do with my guests before we close the program, I ask you to look into the people of Zimbabwe and share a message from your heart, maybe something that we didn't discuss or something that we discussed and that you feel you need to talk about as your closing remarks.
Thank you. It was an honor actually to be with you. And to the people of Zimbabwe, I want to say 2023 is never too late. We can still do something drastic to make sure that we win in 2023. And to the young people, my message is particularly for young people of Zimbabwe today. I want to say Zimbabwe is in your hands. And Zimbabwe is your heritage. And Zimbabwe is my heritage. We have no other country except Zimbabwe. So if it means we fight for Zimbabwe, let us do so. And let me also remind you, all successful revolutions across the world, they've been fought and funded by young people. Because the future is yours. Mnangagwa today is 80 plus years. All those leaders you find in government are way past their effective years. But it's up to us as young people and as younger generations to stand up to fight for our country. We love it. We should fight for Zimbabwe. We deserve a better country. And there is no reason for you, even if you are from ZANU-PF, you are from CCC, Transform Zimbabwe, whichever political party, we should unite and demand for an end to corruption, for instance. Corruption is never good for anybody. We should hold them accountable to say, why do we have no medicine in our public hospitals when we've got so much diamonds? When we've got so much endowments as a nation, the mineral resources we have, where are they and where is the money going? We must hold them to account. And when we speak truth to power, don't be mistaken to say that we are wrong or we are trying to achieve anything mischievous. All we are saying is to say the truth is in plain sight. Let's address it and let's speak truth to power. And young people, you can galvanize for change in this country and transformation. You can come together and unite irrespective of the political party you come from. Zimbabwe is yours. It's not Jacob Ngarivumes, it's not Mnangagwa's, it's not Nelson Chamisa's. We all collectively should own this country. I dread to see one day youths from ZANU-PF, MDC, CCC, and whatever coming together and demand for change and hold leaders to account to say enough is enough, we deserve a better country. Honestly and surely, for how long should we have Zimbabwe like this? We can't. We can lead a revolution to a better country, to say we've had enough. I believe that we can come together, combine ourselves, and fight for our heritage. We have no better country except Zimbabwe. So thank you. My message is to say, don't waste your time focusing on those other things alone. You can do your social media and everything else. You can follow the people you love and do everything else, but go back to the basics. Fight for corruption, fight for sovereignty, fight for dignity. You deserve dignity in this country. This is our home. We want a better country. In this country, we will live. In this country, we will fight. And in this country, we will have a free country that will have equal opportunities one day. I believe it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President of Transform Zimbabwe, Jacob Ngarivume, for joining us here on this, the Free Talk in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. Now, this is going to be our last episode of the Free Talk this year. We're going to be joining you again next year on the second edition of our Free Talk series in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. Now, freedom is a birthright. We, the people of Zimbabwe, should be free to express ourselves. The Constitution guarantees us the right, the freedom of association, freedom to share and receive information, freedoms and rights to a better life, rights to a well-functioning health care system, education and shelter. Raising your voice to demand those things from the people that you elected into office is also your right. You do not become better people because you are quiet. You become better citizens because you tell your leaders what you desire, and your leaders perform better because they know that you will speak if they fail to perform. This is me, your host as usual, Dara. Recently acquitted, of course, after I was arrested for doing my job, taking pictures so that we tell the Zimbabwean story. We will not stop. We will continue on here, the Free Talk, here, Heart and Soul TV and radio. Thank you very much for choosing us as your station of choice and your program of heart. Until next time. Thank you.